Rome was coming. Its armies were close. And Egypt's queen had one final choice. She could surrender, lose her crown, and become a prisoner of Rome, or she could protect her name, her kingdom, and her legend forever. Her name was Cleopatra, and she dared to challenge the most powerful city on earth. In this story, you will practice English by listening to real history. Listen slowly, follow the scenes, and enter the dangerous world of ancient Egypt and Rome. More than 2,000 years ago, the Mediterranean world was changing fast. Old kingdoms were weak, but Rome was growing stronger every year. Roman generals did not only fight battles, they also controlled kings, money, and borders. Egypt was rich, old, and beautiful, but it stood in Rome's shadow, its grain-fed cities, its gold-bought armies. Its ports connected worlds. Whoever controlled Egypt could influence the future of Rome itself. Cleopatra was born into the royal family of Egypt, but her family was not fully Egyptian. She belonged to the Ptolemies, a Greek dynasty that ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great. For centuries, this family lived like pharaohs, but thought like Greek kings. Cleopatra understood something important. To rule Egypt, she had to become Egypt. She learned languages. She studied politics. She listened, watched, and prepared. Many rulers wanted power. Cleopatra wanted survival, control, and respect. When her father died, Cleopatra became queen. But the crown was not safe. She had to share power with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. In the palace, family did not always mean love. It often meant danger. Advisors, soldiers, and powerful men began to choose sides. Cleopatra was young, but she was not easy to control. Soon she was pushed away from power and forced to fight for her throne. At the same time, Rome was fighting itself. Two Roman giants, Julius Caesar and Pompey, were enemies. Pompey ran to Egypt, hoping to find safety. But Egypt's rulers made a brutal choice. Pompey was killed. When Caesar arrived, he did not see loyalty. He saw weakness and fear. Cleopatra saw her chance. To return to power, she needed Caesar. Later stories say she entered Caesar's presence in a secret and dramatic way. Whether every detail is true or not, the message was clear. Cleopatra knew how to turn danger into theater. She did not beg like a victim. She spoke like a queen. Caesar listened, and soon her enemy inside Egypt became his enemy too. The fight for Cleopatra's throne became part of Rome's larger game. Alexandria, the great city of books and palaces, became a battlefield. The streets were filled with soldiers, fear, and rumors. Cleopatra had taken a great risk by trusting Caesar. If Caesar lost, she could lose everything. But Caesar was not an ordinary general. With Roman force and Egyptian support, Cleopatra returned to the throne. Cleopatra was queen again, but Egypt was no longer alone. Rome had entered the palace, and it would never truly leave. Cleopatra and Caesar became allies, and perhaps much more than allies. Soon Cleopatra gave birth to a son. His name was Caesarion. To Cleopatra, he was the future, a child with Egyptian royal blood, and a connection to Julius Caesar was powerful. Cleopatra later traveled to Rome, the city that watched her with cold eyes. To some Romans, she was exotic, rich, and dangerous. She was not a Roman wife. She was a foreign queen with her own power. Caesar was already powerful, but his connection to Cleopatra made enemies nervous. In Rome, whispers could become knives, and in the year 44 before Christ, Caesar was murdered. With Caesar dead, Rome fell again into fear and civil war. Cleopatra returned to Egypt, carrying both danger and hope. Her son Caesarion could be seen as Caesar's blood. That made him valuable to Cleopatra, but dangerous to other Romans. In Rome, new men began to fight for Caesar's legacy. Two names would shape Cleopatra's final years: Mark Antony and Octavian. Mark Antony was a soldier, a politician, and one of Caesar's closest men. He had courage, charm, and a love for glory. Octavian was different. He was younger, colder, and more careful. Antony seemed like fire. Octavian seemed like ice. Both wanted power. Both needed the East. And both watched Egypt. Cleopatra knew that Egypt could not hide from Rome anymore. In 41 before Christ, Cleopatra went to meet Mark Antony. She did not arrive like a prisoner. She arrived like a living goddess. Her entrance was not only beauty, it was strategy. She understood that power is also a performance. Antony expected a queen who needed him. He found a queen who could help him. From that meeting, a new alliance began. Antony needed money, ships, and support for his campaigns. Cleopatra needed protection, recognition, and a strong partner against Octavian. Together, they looked powerful enough to change the world. Their relationship became political, personal, and impossible to ignore. Cleopatra gave Antony wealth. Antony gave Cleopatra Roman influence. But every gift between them made Octavian more suspicious. In Rome, Octavian understood a powerful truth. He did not need to defeat Cleopatra only with armies. He could defeat her with words. He painted her as dangerous, foreign, and too powerful over Antony. Antony was shown as a Roman hero weakened by an Eastern queen. It was not the full truth, but it was useful. While Rome whispered, Alexandria shined. Cleopatra's court was rich, intelligent, and full of ceremony. She ruled a kingdom that was old, proud, and still important. To her people, she was not only a woman in a Roman love story. She was a ruler trying to keep Egypt alive. But survival became more difficult as Antony moved closer to her world. Then came a ceremony that shocked Rome. Antony and Cleopatra presented their children as rulers of eastern lands. Caesarion was honored as the son of Julius Caesar. For Cleopatra, this was a dream of future power. For Octavian, it was a perfect weapon. He could tell Rome that Antony had betrayed his own people. The conflict was no longer hidden. Rome moved toward war, but Octavian was careful. He did not simply declare war on Antony. He declared war on Cleopatra. This made the war look Roman, patriotic, and necessary. Cleopatra had challenged Rome. Now Rome was coming for her. Antony and Cleopatra gathered ships, soldiers, and hope. Their fleet was large, but size does not always win wars. Octavian had Agrippa, a brilliant commander at sea. Agrippa cut supply lines and made Antony's position weaker. Inside Antony's camp, confidence began to break. Cleopatra still had treasure, ships, and one last chance. On the sea near Actium, two futures faced each other. One future belonged to Antony and Cleopatra. The other belonged to Octavian and the empire he would build. The battle was slow, heavy, and full of confusion. Orders were hard to follow. Fear moved faster than the ships. Then Cleopatra's ships broke through and sailed away. Was it a planned escape? Was it panic? History still debates the moment. What matters is this. Antony followed her. His fleet lost heart. His soldiers lost faith. Octavian did not need a perfect victory. He needed a final one. After Actium, the dream of an Eastern empire began to die. Cleopatra and Antony returned to Egypt, but time was against them. Alexandria was still beautiful, but its walls could not stop Rome. Antony tried to fight again, but his power was broken. Men who once followed him began to leave. Cleopatra tried to negotiate, protect her children, and save what she could. But Octavian wanted more than victory. He wanted a symbol. He wanted Cleopatra alive, so Rome could see her defeated. Then false news reached Antony. He heard that Cleopatra was dead. Broken by defeat and grief, Antony chose death, but Cleopatra was still alive. The mistake made the tragedy even darker. Antony died near the woman who had changed his final years. Now Cleopatra stood before Octavian, the man who had destroyed her dream. He was polite, controlled, and impossible to trust. Cleopatra asked for mercy, especially for her children, but she understood Rome better than Rome expected. She knew Octavian wanted to parade her in his triumph. For Cleopatra, that was not life. It was the death of her name. Cleopatra prepared herself like a queen, not like a prisoner. Ancient stories say a snake was brought to her. Some details are uncertain, but the result is clear. Cleopatra chose death before humiliation. She was 39 years old. With her death, the age of the pharaohs came to an end. Egypt became a province of Rome. Its wealth now served the empire that Cleopatra had tried to resist. Caesarion, her son, was too dangerous to be allowed to live. Octavian could not risk another son of Caesar. Cleopatra's other children were taken to Rome. The queen was gone, but Rome still used her image. After Egypt fell, Octavian stood above all his rivals. Soon he would become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. The Roman Republic faded, and a new imperial age began. Cleopatra did not create that change alone, but her fall helped Octavian tell the story of his rise. He became the man who saved Rome from a foreign queen. For centuries, people remembered Cleopatra through Roman eyes. Some called her dangerous. Some called her seductive. Some called her a threat. But those words often say more about Rome than about her. Behind the legend was a ruler who spoke, planned, negotiated, and survived. She used beauty when useful, but her real weapon was intelligence. She lived in a world where one wrong decision could destroy a kingdom. Cleopatra still matters because her story is about power and image. She understood that leaders must control more than armies. They must control stories, symbols, and the way people remember them. Octavian won the war, but Cleopatra refused to let him own her final moment. She lost Egypt, but she kept control of her legend. That is why her name still feels alive after 2,000 years. Cleopatra was not simply a lover of powerful men. She was a ruler surrounded by impossible choices. She fought with words, wealth, theater, alliances, and courage. Sometimes she won. Sometimes she miscalculated. But she never became small. Against Rome, she was outnumbered, outmatched, and finally defeated. But defeat is not always the end of a story. Rome took her kingdom, but it could not erase her name. Her world disappeared, but her image crossed centuries. Every generation asks the same question. Who was the real Cleopatra? Maybe she was all of these things: queen, mother, strategist, survivor, legend. She challenged Rome not because victory was certain, but because surrender was impossible. And that is why Cleopatra remains the queen history could never forget.